Thursday, here with a nice bottle of red wine. This Sunday at the Rock we'd normally be sharing communion together, so I thought I would do a little devotion on the theme of communion. Not going to open the wine just now, I'll save that for later. So once a month, normally last Sunday of the month, we'd share communion together and remember the Last Supper, where Jesus took bread and wine and spoke of his body and his blood and these symbols, and asked his followers to do this in remembrance of him. So we continue to do this simple act of, we use grape juice, but we take bread and wine and share it amongst ourselves. Those that know me know I've got really shaky hands, always had shaky hands, and growing up in the church I used to hate that moment where someone would pass a really full glass of wine to you. Always scared I'd spill it, and used to hate communion. I just found it a really uncomfortable experience due to my hands, but I guess as I've got older, really enjoyed just that moment once a month of just pausing and reflecting. And I think every time I do that, get a different insight into who Jesus is and into the character of God. One of the questions that I think loads of people ask at a time like this, where the world becomes really uncertain, is where's God in all of this? Does he not care? Where's he at? Has he just abandoned us? And for me, as I take the bread and the wine, when I remember his body and his blood, I remember a God who came to be with us. I'm going to read some verses that, well, just one verse that I read on our last devotion, but just focus in on a different bit of it. John chapter 1 verse 14 says this: "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only, who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." So John's talking about this moment where God puts on human flesh, where he comes in the form of a baby, but God doesn't stay far away. It's not a God who's disinterested, a God who doesn't care about us, but a God who would physically become human. One of our beliefs as Christians is in the divinity of Christ. We would say that Jesus is the full embodiment of who God is, that he is God himself. And we see in the story of Jesus a God who weeps, a God who, as he sees his friend die, that he just breaks down and cries. Shortest verse in the Bible is Jesus wept. And we see him care for people, we see him draw close to people, we see him look after the most vulnerable, we see him invite in the excluded, but we also see a God who would come and die for us, a God who doesn't stay far away, a God who literally would put his life on the line, a God who would give everything because he loves us. Now, a long time before Jesus was even about, there was a guy called David. You've probably heard the story of David and Goliath. So as this little kid grows up, he becomes king of the country of Israel. He becomes one of their great kings. And he wrote a number of songs, poetry. Him and some others wrote these, but this one is one David read. You'll often hear it at funerals. It gives, I think, hope in a time where everything feels really unstable. And it's full of just really powerful imagery. And I'm going to read the whole bit, but one of my favourite lines in this is, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me." So let's read the whole thing. You may have heard it before. This may be the first time you've heard it, but David writes this: "The Lord is my shepherd. I shall not be in want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He restores my soul. He guides me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a table before me in the presence of my enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." So if you're asking that question, where is God? Even though you walk through the valley of the shadow of death, even though it feels like huge mountains either side of you, even though it feels dark and scary, is with you, is with us. So as you're stuck in your house, or maybe you're in the front line and having to go out and put your life on the line, remember God is with you. Remember that he walks alongside you, that we don't have a God who is disinterested and not, a God who doesn't care about us, but we have a God who would put on human flesh, who would come and be one of us, who would walk with his friends, who would cry at the death of one of his friends, who would put his very life on the line. So even though we walk through the valley of the shadow of death, we don't need to fear evil, because he is with us.